I've held back from telling this story to anyone outside of a few close friends for a long time now. It wasn't big in the news, but I think it should have been. Looking back now, I can see just how horrifying the whole thing really was. When I was 14, I was incredibly naive, desperate for attention, and living in a state of constant chaos. My home life was abusive. I wasn't allowed to hang out with friends except during school hours, so I was isolated. I didn't have the support system that most kids take for granted. Instead, I went looking for connection in the worst possible place, the internet. Like a lot of teens in the early 2010s, I found Omegle. At first, it felt exciting, chatting with strangers from all over the world. I had no idea then just how dangerous that place was. And that's where I met him. He said his name was Noble. He told me he was 20 years old, lived in Missouri, and it seemed like he zeroed in on me right away. He called me pretty, told me I was special, gave me the kind of attention that I had never gotten at home. And when you're a lonely 14-year-old girl, those words feel like love. It didn't matter that my mom, who I call my birth giver for reasons that I'm not going to get into here, tried to shut this down when she found out. She took my phone, computer, any devices I could to communicate with him, set up the barriers that she could. But I was stubborn. I thought Noble loved me, and no one was going to convince me otherwise. Over the next year, I was removed from my home multiple times. Sometimes I was placed with relatives. Other times I ended up in group homes. Social workers and case managers shuffled me around like I was a problem that they couldn't exactly solve. But through every move, Noble stayed a constant in my life. So long as I had a phone, he was there with me. Eventually, I learned the truth about Noble. He wasn't 20 like he said. He was 31, a grown man more than twice my age, but by that point, I was so far gone that I didn't care. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that he was the only one who loved me, and that's how deeply I had been groomed. Every time I was placed somewhere new, someone would eventually find out that I was in contact with this man. They'd take my phone, try to block him, remind me that what he was doing was dangerous. But it never stuck. The second I had access to my phone again, I went straight back to him. At one point during all of this, I was living with my biological father. He caught on to Noble too, and did what he could to stop it. It worked for a while. I was put on medication, I was in therapy, and I started to stabilize. But then we moved, and eventually I was pulled out of treatment. Without that structure, I started to unravel, and Noble was right there waiting. By the age of 15, I was in yet another group home. I'd only been there 3 weeks when I decided to take off. And of course, the first person that I contacted was Noble. He drove 16 hours straight from Missouri to New York to come pick me up. That alone should tell you the lengths that he was willing to go to get me. I had given some random woman at a gas station a sob story about why I was out there alone, and she allowed me to hide in her house while he made the trip. When he got there, I climbed right into his car without any hesitation. We started driving back to Missouri, but somewhere in Pennsylvania, I realized just how deep his lies went. I was playing on his phone when I noticed messages and Snapchats from other girls. Lots of them. When I confronted him about these, he admitted that he was doing the same thing with them that he'd been doing with me. Swapping photos, late night calls, that same "you're special" routine. I broke down crying. I begged him to either turn around and take me back, or drop me off on the side of the road and I'd find my own way back. But that's when he snapped. He pulled the car over and instantly turned violent. I'll spare you the details, but I think you can connect the dots. I was just this 100-pound, underfed teenager, and he was a grown man nearly twice my size. I never stood a chance. When I woke up, I was in a hotel room with him. I was on the bed. He was on top of me. That was the moment that I finally understood I had never been loved. I had only been targeted. The rest of that trip is still a blur in my memory. I learned quickly that if I wanted to survive this, I had to pretend that everything was fine. I had to play the role of a happy underage girlfriend, even while my entire life was spiraling. When we finally reached his apartment in Missouri, I saw my one chance to fight back. I asked for his phone, pretending that I wanted to play a game, and for whatever reason, this dumbass handed it over. I immediately messaged both my grandmother and my birth giver on Facebook, telling them that I loved them, and if they didn't hear from me, I'm in Missouri. I have no doubt that that message saved me. Maybe a couple of days later, Noble's door was kicked in by the FBI and Missouri State Police. They cuffed him on the spot and pulled me out of there. They took every phone, every computer, every hard drive in that apartment. Basically, every piece of technology. You'd think that would be the end of the nightmare for me, but in some ways, it wasn't. Instead of being treated like a victim of this, I was treated like some sort of accomplice. I was placed in juvenile detention, then transferred to a psychiatric ward, then back to juvie again. I was 15 years old. I'd been kidnapped, abused, and groomed. Yet the system treated me like a criminal. Eventually, I was flown back to New York and placed into residential care. That's where my life finally started to even out again. As for Noble, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. 30 years for what he did to me and to several other young girls. Now, here's the part that made me want to share this. A few years back, basically out of nowhere, Noble found me again, from prison, on Instagram. He actually contacted me, sliding into DMs like nothing had changed. The moment I saw his face pop up, I laid into him. I told him that he was disgusting, that I wasn't this little girl anymore, and that he needed to leave me alone. I think he got the memo, but he never should have been able to reach out to me in the first place. I still keep tabs on his case as best as I can. At one point I noticed his sentence dropped from 30 years to 26. I figure maybe he's working time off or there was some sort of deal that he cut. I don't know, but it scares me, because if he could reach me once, what's stopping him from trying again and again? Looking back on this whole thing, it's clear now. Noble never loved me. He only preyed on me. He saw a vulnerable kid in and out of group homes bouncing from one unstable placement to another, and he exploited every weakness I had. I share this story now, not for sympathy, but as a warning. There are people like Noble everywhere, searching for kids who feel unloved, unwanted, or ignored. And those kids, like I once was, are often the easiest targets. If my story can make even one person think twice before trusting someone they meet online, then it's worth telling. Because no child, no person should ever go through what I went through. In the summer of 1997, I was about 4 years old. My family spent a weekend afternoon at a big water park a couple of towns over from where we lived. Thinking back about this place, it's the kind of spot that seemed magical to a kid, but it had to be chaotic to a parent. The main entrance opened up into a bustling food court filled with the smell of French fries, hot dogs, and sunscreen. There was a big map nearby showing off all the attractions in the park. To the left was an indoor arcade that had a couple of baby rides out front. Behind it was a massive wave pool that seemed to stretch on forever. And to the right was the kiddie section with splash pads and miniature slides. Beyond that were the lazy river and a bunch of taller water slides where my older brothers were already eager to go. Because they were older and wanted the thrill rides, my mom split from them and stayed with me in the kiddie park. I was the baby of the family, so while my brothers disappeared toward the slides, I happily played in ankle-deep water and made fast friends with the kids splashing around me. I remember my mom sitting nearby on one of those flimsy folding lounge chairs, her line of sight to me partially blocked by other little slides and a bunch of kids running back and forth. That's when a boy around my size approached me. He asked if I wanted to go to the wave pool. To me, the wave pool looked like the crown jewel of the entire park. You could hear the roar of the water and laughter even from the kiddie section, and I'd been eyeing it ever since we walked in. But I knew my mom's rules. She had told me in no uncertain terms, no wave pool without an adult. So I told the boy I couldn't go. But without missing a beat, he told me not to worry, that his dad was waiting for us, and he'd already talked to my mom about keeping an eye on us. I was 4 years old, trusting, and when he said the one thing I wanted to hear, that it was fine to go to the wave pool, I was eager to believe him. So I followed. My mom probably didn't notice right away. From where she was, I don't think she could easily see past all the kids running around in the kiddie area. One moment I was splashing at the bottom of a slide, and the next I was walking away hand in hand with another kid. When we reached the wave pool, sure enough, there was a man waiting for us. The guy didn't hesitate either. He immediately took my hand, replacing the little boy's, and guided me straight into the water. I can still remember that feeling, my tiny hand in his much larger one, being led like it was the most natural thing in the world. We weren't in the water long, maybe 2 minutes? Just enough time for me to think I was finally getting my wish, but then without any explanation, he yoinked me up out of the pool and started walking me towards the front of the park. At 4 years old, I didn't think to question it. I assumed maybe we were going to get food, since that's where the food court was. But as we got closer to the gates, a lifeguard suddenly stepped into our path. She bent down and asked me directly, "Is your name?" before repeating my name. Without thinking, I said yes, and for whatever reason, immediately burst into tears. I think that I was convinced I was in trouble. Before I could process what was happening, she scooped me out of the man's arms. And just like that, I saw my mom running towards me, sobbing, frantic, and completely out of breath. Years later, when I was much better equipped to understand what had happened, my mom filled in the blanks for me. She told me that she noticed I was gone within minutes. She ran to the nearest lifeguard, describing me down to the ribbons in my hair. Yellow bathing suit, pink flowers, 2 yellow bows. She begged them to shut the park gates before anyone could leave. That lifeguard who stopped me at the entrance, she was waiting specifically for that description. And because my mom had been so accurate, that lifeguard didn't miss. Now, here's the part that still scares me to no end. When I asked my mom later about the boy who had lured me to the wave pool, she told me there was no boy. None of the staff, no other witnesses remembered seeing another child. It had only been that man. Which means the kid I thought I followed may have never existed. Whether it was my memory trying to make sense of it all, or whether he really had used some kind of trick to approach me, my mom insists that it was just one creepy guy. She said after the lifeguard intervened, the man willingly dropped me, beelined for the entrance, and sprinted off to his car. I guess security had tried to follow him, but they had lost track once they got into the mess of cars in the lot. To this day, I still don't know what his plan was. Was he going to take me out of the park and vanish completely? Or was he just taking me to the parking lot to do other unimaginable things to me? The thought of how close I came to never making it back to my mom makes me sick even now as an adult. Because when you're little, you don't see the world as evil as you do as when you're older. You think you're safe in public. You think everyone around you is just there for the same fun that you're having. But predators don't always look like monsters. I was unbelievably lucky that day. And it left me with a lingering lesson that I've carried into adulthood. Children don't recognize danger the way that some adults do. A smile and a promise of something exciting is all it takes for some kids to follow a stranger without any hesitation. And without vigilant adults around, those stories could end very differently. So even though this happened decades ago, I still think about it regularly. About that yellow bathing suit, about that lifeguard saying my name, and about how easily my story could have ended before it ever really began. Let me preface this story by saying in my early 20s, I was a complete disaster. and admittedly made a lot of poor choices. Luckily, I survived them all, and now I have a treasure trove of interesting stories to tell. When I was 21, I found myself without a place to live. On the first night, I went to a bar where a friend was performing stand-up comedy. Now, I had started drinking at maybe 2 or 3 p.m. that day, so I was pretty gone by the time Creepy Man enters the picture. Creepy Man was a friend of the guy performing stand-up. The four of us hang out at the bar until closing. I happen to mention offhandedly to Creepy Man that I don't have a place to stay, and he invites us all over to spend the night. Creepy Guy was a decade plus older than the rest of us, and he was breaking out into shamanic chants all night long. But hey, a bed is a bed, right? We arrive at his place in the wee hours of the morning, smoke a little weed and drink for a while, and then my friend dips out for the evening. Me and the other guy continue to hang out with Creepy Guy until I pass out on the couch. I wake up in the morning and I'm alone. Creepy Guy gets up soon after, and funnily enough, brings out some women's clothes in my size for me to change into. I think back now and wonder what he was doing with the women's clothes, but at the time, all I did was thank him before haphazardly picking out an outfit. Then we talk more about my situation, and he offers for me to stay there as long as I need. He tells me a story about losing his wife and kids, while also telling me that I remind him of his daughter. We end up spending the day together. It was odd to say the least. We met up with a schizophrenic guy friend of his who collected rocks. We split a meal at BK. Then we went back to his house. He wanted some help doing the dishes, so of course I offered to help. At this point, he lets me know that the water is shut off, so he has to go get water out of his neighbor's spigot. I start to get a little suspicious, but that's when I begin to connect the dots, and it dawns on me that this man is homeless, and he's squatting in this house. It's getting late now, and I'm a good hour outside of the city, so I decide my best bet is to spend the night and peace out early in the morning. He says that I can stay in the spare bedroom, and he lets me wash up with a bucket of water before bed. I'm in the bathroom getting ready, and I hear him pacing in the hallway, talking to himself, saying something to the effect of, "I'm not going to do it. Don't get any ideas." At this point, I'm thoroughly creeped out, and my heart is just about pounding outside of my chest. I leave the bathroom expecting him to be standing there with a knife, but he's not. He tells me I'm safe and how he's not going to try anything with me because of how much I remind him of his daughter. I've got chills now and a pit in my stomach, but all I can muster is a half-hearted smile and try to get through this interaction. He then shows me to the bedroom. As we enter it, he says something like, "Don't be scared of the blood. It's just from homeless men that got into a fight." My heart drops, but I politely say goodnight and shut the door, locking it behind him. I can't remember now if it was a bunk bed or not, but either way, I remember staring up at a large bloodstain above where the bed was. At this point, I'm 90% sure that I'm going to be murdered, and I'm trying to figure out how to get out of this situation. Creepy Guy is still outside in the hallway, pacing around and talking to himself. I decide that I have to wait it out until morning, when the buses are running again. So I open the window, take off the screen part. I turn off the lights. I stay fully dressed with my shoes on and keep my bag right next to me in bed. I lay there all night, prepared to fight and escape at any given moment. Luckily, dawn breaks and I'm still alive, so I sneak out of the house and catch a bus back to town. This guy texts me throughout the day, asking when I'm coming back, and I rightfully ghost him. Haven't seen him since, but occasionally I wonder what was going on with that dude, and if I was in as much danger as I feel like I was in hindsight. When I graduated college, I was about 24 years old, and I really wanted to get out on my own and try living alone. Luckily for me, my grandma had asked to be moved into an assisted living center about a year prior. I'd asked my parents if I could live in her house. They talked it over with my grandma, and she agreed that it would be nice to have someone living there after a year of it sitting empty. This was in a kind of up-and-coming area, although it still had its rough spots. I was so excited about it, until I got there to do a walkthrough to see how I was going to set up my things. The house was a shotgun-style home with a cellar that could only be accessed from the outside. While I was walking through the house, I swore I was hearing noises. I finally realized that they were coming from the basement. I called the police and they came out and escorted 6 people from the cellar. They were squatters that had been living there. After they left, I went down there to find all kinds of stuff, save for the drugs and other illegal stuff that the cops took with them. It looked like someone had spray painted the walls all over. It was just a concrete cellar where the water heater and HVAC was, so I wouldn't have really cared, except it seemed to be kind of satanic. I don't know anything about that stuff, but there was a couple of pentagrams and a chalk circle on the floor. Cops didn't really have anything to say about it. They didn't know either. I poured some water on the floor to wash away the circle, but the walls I couldn't do much about, so I just left them as they were. Fast forward a few months of me living there, I had just about forgotten all about this. I'd started dating my future wife, and she was over a lot. We were getting ready for bed one night. I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth. That's when I heard a knock come from the back door. At first, I thought it was strange, although with the running water and the old house itself, maybe I could have imagined it. But the knock came again. It was 1 a.m. and this was my back door. Someone had to have come into my backyard by opening the fence gate. I promptly grabbed my gun and went to the door, keeping my firearm out of view. I look through the window and I see some guy standing on the porch. I opened the interior wooden door, but kept the outside storm door shut and locked. I asked what he was here for since it was so late. All he said was,
"Is Christina here?"
I told him he must have the wrong house, and all he said was,
"Oh, so do you want me to leave?"
I told him that would be a good choice, and an even better one if he didn't come back. He just stood there staring at me. I was getting nervous at this point, so with nothing else left to say, I shut the door. He walked down the steps and just stood in my backyard, staring up at the house for about 15 minutes. Then he walked his way over to the cellar doors and tried to open them. I had them padlocked months ago, and he eventually gave up. I opened up my back window and I told him that he'd best get out of here before the cops show up, or he gets shot, or both. Again, without saying a word, he just stared. But he finally did leave. I'll admit, I didn't sleep much that night. Again, a couple of months later, I'm in one part of the house and my girlfriend's in another, when I hear her yell my name. She tells me that the guy is back. He's just standing in the backyard staring up at the house. This time, it was broad daylight. I wasn't going to confront him this time. I decided to call the cops. He decided to try the cellar doors again, but ultimately left before the police showed up. The next day, I went down to the cellar to see if maybe there had been something left behind that he was trying to get, but I found nothing. It's just a damp, disgusting cellar with a dirt floor. I have zero idea why he wanted in there so badly. I highly doubt the satanic stuff had anything to do with it. It just made this whole thing feel even creepier. I unfortunately had to move out sometime later as I could no longer afford to live there. Never saw the guy again. Although I will admit, anytime my motion lights flick on in the middle of the night, I get a brief glimpse of this man in my memory.